he traveled towards Midian, he said, "May my Lord guide me in the right path." When he reached Midian's water, he found a crowd of people watering and noticed two women waiting on the side. He said, "What is that you need? What is it that you need?" They said, "We are not able to water until the crowd disperses, and our father is an old man." He watered for them, then turned to the shade, saying, "My lord, whatever provisions you send to me, I am in dire need for it." Soon one of the two women approached him shyly and said, "My father invites you to pay you for watering for us." When he met him, he told him his story. He said, "Have no fear. You have been saved from the oppressive people." Once Moses marries, one of the two women said, "Oh, my father, hire him. He is the best one to hire, for he is strong and honest." He said, "I wish to offer one of my daughters for you to marry in return for working for me for 8 pilgrimages. If you make them 10, it will be voluntary on your part. I do not wish to make this matter too difficult for you. You will find me, God willing, righteous." He said, "It is an agreement between me and you. Whichever period I fulfill, you will not be averse to either one. God is the guarantor of what we said." Back to Egypt. When he had fulfilled his obligation, he traveled with his family towards Egypt. He saw from the slope of Mount Sinai a fire. He said to his family, "Stay here. I have seen a fire. Maybe I can bring to you news or a portion of the fire to warm you." When he reached it, he was called from the edge of the right side of the valley in the blessed spot where the burning bush was located. "O Moses, this is me, God, Lord of the universe. Throw down your staff." When he saw it moving like a demon, he turned around and fled. "O Moses, come back. Do not be afraid. You are perfectly safe. Put your hand in your pocket. It will come out white without a blemish. Fold your wings and settle down from your fear. These are 2 proofs from your Lord to be shown to Pharaoh and his elders. They have been wicked." He said, "My Lord, I killed one of them, and I fear lest they kill me. Also, my brother Aaron is more eloquent than I. Send him with me as a helper to confirm and strengthen me. I fear lest they disbelieve me." He said, "We will strengthen you with your brother, and we will provide you both with manifest authority. Thus, they will not be able to touch either one of you. With our miracles, the two of you, together with those who follow you, will be the victors." Okay, it's a huge, huge range of verses. So, obviously, 28-23, we see, behavior that is typical, or at least like exemplifies a good submitter, right? Uh, a good submitter, just as they're not stingy with their wealth, uh, when it comes to like money, they're not stingy with their effort, right? And we see God says, early, I think in other chapters, like about the children of Israel, that we wanted to make those who were oppressed on earth, uh, victorious for once, right? So there's also this kind of focus on, you know, advocating for the orphan, advocating for the poor, right? It seems obvious to us because these are things that are like, most cultures do value, but yeah, I think we see an example of that here, and obviously we should adhere to that. Other than that, I think it shows also the wisdom of the father, right? Because I'm sure we've seen people who kind of like talk nice, right? And like have all the kind of the right words to say to appear righteous. And maybe they are, maybe they're not. But one thing that is hard to kind of fake is, actually putting your money where your mouth is, so to speak, right? So he hears about this guy who's just willing to freely water for 2 random women, right? And as a wise person, of course, he's like, okay, this is like, this is like a real litmus test for the character of this person, right? And that's something I think we should keep in mind, right? Like when somebody's actually tested, when somebody actually, does more than talk, that should be much more valuable for us. Uh, yeah, okay. I have a lot more to say about these verses, but let's open it up. What do people think so far?
Peace be upon you. One great lesson I see here is that the God always make a way for believers. 28, 24, 25. As Moses prayed, my Lord, whatever you send, I'm in dire need of it. So this is also a lesson that God always creates a way or solution for the believers. Mashallah.
I'll add
I have a
something else.
question. Oh, go
Oh,
ahead.
good. You good? I'll hold off.
I just have a question in regards to the 8 to 10 pilgrimages. It's just like it's very odd to me that somebody is like, "Hey, you can work for me for 8 or 10." It doesn't seem like there's any benefit to to extending it. Like I'm wondering if somebody has more insight to that. It's confusing to me.
Uh, my thought is it's that like okay, if someone gives you a job, right? You might genuinely enjoy that job and not just for the sake of the money. Like it works out well. I think the way that it's phrased is saying like, look, you have an obligation for 8, but there's like an option if you want to extend that on because you genuinely, hey, you think that this is of value to you to go to 10. But either one you pick is fine with me. So it's like just an option within a contract. But I think the other telling thing is note that the word for pilgrimage, right, is Hajj. And this is indicating that so if you contemplate like when they would go to pilgrimage, it was also an opportunity to do commerce in that sense. Um, but this individual, the father-in-law of Moses, his name in the Bible is Jethro. It's actually he's got multiple names in the Bible, um, but and the interesting thing is it says that he's from Midian, and Midian is actually one of the sons of Abraham through Keturah, which is one of his wives from Abraham in the Bible. So here's a guy who basically is retaining the Abrahamic practices. So and you think about it, Moses, he being in Egypt, being a slave, they probably lost a lot of their practices. And the fact that God preserved this for him, through this Midian, it's in Arabia, right, northern Arabia, is really telling that when the initial, you can say, for instance, children of Israel lose their ways, that God is preserving their practices through this group within Arabia. Right? So this is at the time of Moses, but you can extrapolate that out to what happened, when Muhammad came on the scene, right? That basically God preserved the practices of Abraham of submission with another remote community, within the southern or you'd say like middle Arabia, right? I just think that that's kind of telling.
Um,
What's
oh, Brandy?
oh, go ahead, brother.
No, you first. You first.
God bless you. Just one thing that is sticking out to me a whole lot is the fact that that Moses was in such dire need. I mean, we've all been hungry and hot and cold, and it definitely makes the hunger much worse. Makes it feel like a hole is being eaten through your stomach, and your body aches and you're tired. You just go through all these physical um, things uh, that affect even the way you think and feel about things. And here he is setting himself aside, his hunger and his pains aside, for to, be in service of someone that was needing his strength to water for them, which is also hard to do when you're in dire need of provisions. So, that's definitely something to strive for, to, like, no matter what we're going through, that we're always ready to be in service for others who are in need.
This reminds me of something, Rashad. I was listening to one of the Quran studies by Rashad, and like Raju said, like God gives away for the righteous no matter what, right? And it's not just for Moses, right? The man is righteous, and his daughters just got some random guy to water for them by God's leave, right? And this reminds me when Rashad said something like, raising kids is like piece of cake for submitters, right? Because they trust God completely. When you're not around them, well, when you're around them and when you're not around them, they're under God's protection, right? And I see that here, right? The righteous man, his daughter just being provided for in a situation where they normally would not. Just a small note. That's it.
What's interesting is we contrast this with the example in chapter 18 when Moses and his teacher they go to the town. The town is inhospitable. The teacher, sees a wall that's about to collapse, and he patches it. Moses makes this comment, "Hey, you could have asked a wage for that." And you contrast this to this event where, clearly Moses is in dire need. He has nothing aside from, whatever possessions are on him. And rather than thinking, oh man, these guys, they should help me out, his state of mind is, how can I be of service to others? And I think that that's just, it's very telling within the culture, because the fact that the women, they had to go wait on the side while the guys were, feeding their livestock. And then here comes this, nomad to assist. It showed that that was not part of their culture. That this stuck out so much to them. Like, wow, what kind of a guy is this? That he's, putting the needs of people in need over his own needs. So I kind of take those lessons where, one, no matter how little we have, we still have something that we can offer others. Then two, the importance of establishing that within a culture, because a culture that becomes standoffish and selfish, then people are less inclined to go and help out others who are in need.
I wanted to comment on 27. Um, it reminds me of like for people that are like in business, you you always notice that are people that are like gonna nickel and dime you and like dispute every like clause in the contract. you know, they're not the best people to work with. And here you have two righteous people that are like, okay, they're leaving 2 years up in the air. Like, I feel like there's something about that character of the submitter that they're not like in a hurry to like squeeze everything and just make everything just so like, they're not like so hungry for money, or they're not so hungry for like an advantage in the material world. Like they're kind of like, they're probably nicer to like do business with. I don't know if you guys have experience with that. I'd love to hear it.
Can you, Ismail? Can you give that last the question stated again?
Yeah. Like in the way they're like discussing their business deal, right? The way they're kind of not, it doesn't seem like they're like two people like trying to get the most out of each other, like a business, like normal business, right? Like if you're just dealing with a stranger, you're gonna want to like eke out every advantage you want, right?
They're
But the other person is gonna try to do the same.
Peace be upon you. They're weighing the scales equitably. They're not seeking to exploit one another. Right.
Yeah, they're not
They're
desperate, you know. They're not desperate. Like they're willing to leave 2 years. Just like, hey, I mean, look,
on the
if you
table.
want 8, fine. If you want 10, fine. Like, how many business deals that we see that people are just so like calm and like trusting, you know?
Isn't it also funny how like it's kind of a, I don't know, an outcome of independence, because like here Moses is clearly in dire need. He's subservient to this Jethro, this gentleman of Midian, right? And he's essentially giving him an outlet for independence over an interim, which also provides him for the future of his family, right? So it's not so much like work. It's like, hey, I'm going to help you become independent and a good supporter for my daughter as well.
The basically what you would call a high trust society. You know, as we become more low trust, people don't have a foundation of integrity and faith. Yeah, it requires more and more kind of like contractual details to be spelled out. But if you're dealing with people who have high levels of integrity, you know, God consciousness, the when they make their word, they're going to go above and beyond to maintain their word, to give, you know, the benefit of the doubt to the other side. Um, but the reality is, this is rare, right? If you look at the example of David, when he's litigating between the two brothers who have the dispute, he says it as it is. Most people don't treat each other fairly, right? Most people are going to look for every advantage, loophole, um, the chance they have to get the upper hand. Um, and you know, for that reason, it's like, yeah, the God advocates to write down all the details, no matter how small, because most people don't have that level of integrity.
You know what's also like interesting? This is, you know, involves marriage, and marriage is like, especially where I'm from, is famously like a very contentious like issue. Like the wife's family is trying to get the most, you know, no matter what, and the husband's family is just trying to do the same. So, praise God. It'll be fun to do business with submitter. That's what, you know, submitters. They're just better, you know, God willing.
Yeah, the concept is you hope for the best, but you know, plan for the worst. It would be nice to have that level of trust, like all in all, but there's reason God says, you know, no matter the how small the details, like, write it down. Um, it's just gonna save a lot of grief.
Peace. Exactly. I was gonna mention that because we put our trust in God. Of course, we do our best. But I when I had to start a little bit deal with the submitter, I never thought that it will be even thinking about any dispute or anything. But I had, and that submitter, which later on, of course, we were years, maybe about 2 years like that, we were in touch. But he took my money. He never paid back. So that's why this verse is, what Brother Dude mentioned is it's important. We trust God, and we have to follow His commandments, no matter whoever you're dealing with. It's better to write down everything. So a person who I never thought it was a submitter, it took my money. I never paid back.
It does go to show, though, it's you know, we trust that God is the one who's doing everything, and it's this balance between standing up for your right and you know, but at the same time going above and beyond to be hospitable and accommodating. It's tough, you know, because if you feel like you're getting taken advantage of and this and that, but you trust that, look, God's the one who's controlling the provisions. And there's this example in you know, God calls out Abraham as like an exemplar example. in the Bible where he has him and Lot. They have a lot of sheep and a lot of workers, and their workers start fighting with one another. And so Abraham tells Lot, says, "Hey, if you go east, I'll go west, and if you go west, I'll go east." Um, Basically giving him the opportunity to choose, which land he thinks is the most suitable. And ironically, he picks he picks Sodom and Gomorrah, which ends up being disastrous. And Abraham, who I can't remember the region of his Canaan, but goes to a place that appears desolate, and we see that in the Quran. That he's in Mecca, where it's a plantless valley, like you can't grow things there. And that's where he's given tons of provisions and prosperity. So, we do things because we want to please God, and we trust that God is the one who's gonna, make things right. But that's hard, when you're seeing someone else what it appears like, taking advantage or not giving that same level of generosity. To echo back to
Yes.
this just this concept of Moses' example that he's a fugitive and homeless, and he's out there serving needs of other people. It reminds me of two stories. One, and I'll just give the quick version. There's a lady in India. Her name was or is a Sindhutai Subkal, and I guess she's a pretty prominent figure. But her backstory is, she was like married off as a child, and her husband basically beats her and leaves her for dead while she's pregnant, and she somehow survives and goes and lives in cemeteries and like basically is about to end her life because it's too miserable. And she hears basically someone like crying in agony. And oh, so she was laying on the train tracks, and then she hears someone crying in agony. She's like, "Well, let me go see what's going on." It was an old dude who's like begging for food. So she goes, begs on his behalf, gets him some food, and whatchamacallit, gives it to him. And then she's like, "Well, I'm too exhausted to kill myself. Let me go get some shade underneath this tree." And there's, I guess, a tree out in the field, and there's one branch that's hanging there, and someone hacked at it, and by like one, one, uh, what do you call it? Like stem, it's barely holding on, but it's still providing her shade. And she's thinking like, "Wow, this tree that's been hacked, like it's still providing me value, benefit." And she was thinking like, "Well, despite my circumstance, what benefit am I to society?" And she realized like there's all these like, orphan kids out on the street. And so she starts being their protector and like, try and take care of them and make sure they're not getting taken advantage of. And then people see her doing this and they start donating money, and she opens up an orphanage where she has like thousands of kids. So, here's someone who, for all intents and purposes, you would think life is written her off. And she realizes, like, no, I still have value, for other people who are in need. So, no matter what our circumstances are, you can guarantee, there's still something that you can provide to other people.
But Mike,
Mike.
one of the reason I mentioned that is that few lessons I learned from that. First of all, I recovered that money even much more by God's grace. Also, I learned that I have to strictly follow God's commandment, the Quran, no matter how long you write it down. And also, it showed to me anyone can change. Basically, maybe someone you see or not believe or whatever, maybe one day they believe and become better than me and you. And maybe someone who you see, like I saw him at that time as a submitter and changed, which I think right now, I think he went back to another form of Sunnism. So I learned a good lesson out of this by God's grace.
Praise God. Peace. I wanted to comment on I think verse 33 is one of them. Uh, with Moses' story, every time I read it, I see a lot of references to being afraid. And I took some time just now to grab all the verses I could locate related to Moses and being afraid, and I highlighted the words fear or afraid. Right, you have um, on repeat Moses being afraid, his mom being afraid, even his followers being afraid, and it's always God saying, "Do not be afraid." He says, "My messenger shall not fear." Chapter 28, verse 7, we inspired Moses' mother, nurse him, and when you fear for his life, throw him into the river without fear or grief. Right? So we know in the Quran, the believers, they neither fear nor grieve, right? This is not just a promise, this is supposed to be the trait of the believers, right? Because if you believe God is running everything, there's no reason to be afraid, and there's no reason to grieve. Right? And going through Moses' story, this is a messenger of God, right? We see how frequently he's afraid and how many times God has to reassure him to stop being afraid. And then you see, I think, once he's departing Egypt, let me see, it says, I have the verse here. When both parties saw each other, Moses' people said, "We will be caught." He said, "No way. My Lord is with me. He will guide me." Right? This is the kind of level of certainty that the believers are supposed to have about God. Right? Why, if you lose let's say you lost $10,000, like, oh, I was carrying $10,000, a suitcase of money, and I lost it. Right? And you don't know where it went, it's gone, maybe even someone stole it. You're supposed to not be afraid and not be worried. Right? If you end up crashing your car, everyone's okay, but you still crash the car. Right? You're not supposed to be worried or afraid or grieving over the fact that there was a car crash. Right? God is running the show, and there's nothing to worry about. There's nothing to be afraid about. And Moses' story is a big reminder because, I mean, in the Quran, Moses is mentioned like 100 something times. Right? So we see a lot of the examples of being afraid is coming from Moses. Right? This is the guy that God says, I picked him to talk to him. Right? He's the one who actually got like a phone to God. Right? And even he was still afraid all the time until, eventually stopped being afraid. So praise be to God.
Peace. I'd like to follow up on what AAA is pointing out about fear. We see in verse 31, Moses is afraid. He throws his staff down, and God tells him, "Come back, do not be afraid." Right. Never had an experience like that before, right? We go to verse 33. He's afraid that the people pursuing him may kill him. And like Brother AAA pointed out, we have the example of Moses' mother in Surah 28, verse 7, who experienced fear about throwing him in the river. And one of the things that's constant in all of these situations is that the person experiences fear, and then God inspires them not to be afraid and gives them reassurance. Now, if we look at verse 33, where it says, Moses is afraid that they may kill him, God reassures Moses in 35, right? God says he's going to strengthen Moses with Aaron. He's going to provide them with the manifest authority, and he reassures him that he will not be touched. So one of the constants through this is what? Fear is a natural human emotion. It's not so much the fear as it is who you turn to when you are afraid. We have the example of David in the Psalms, right? I'm paraphrasing. Yea, though I walk through the valley of death, I shall fear no evil. right? Because my Lord is with me. Fear is a human emotion. But the example in the Quran, throughout the Quran, is that those who are guided, those who in God's kingdom of what? They are reassured. So they have no fear. It doesn't mean, when it means they have no fear, it doesn't mean they are without fear. It means they may experience fear, particularly in circumstances in a situation that they may not be familiar with, but God immediately reassures them. So that protects us from the misunderstanding of thinking that a person who believes is totally without any emotion of fear whatsoever. Nothing should come up in their life where they may have second thoughts. And that, I think, should be clarified. God knows best. Because some people can take that to an extreme. Thank you. Peace.
Well said. Anyone else want to comment, questions regarding the verses?
We see that God says these are two proofs from your Lord in 32 to be shown to Pharaoh and his elders. And we know that, like, Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and his elders first before they set the appointment at the day of festivities. Now, there are, like we've highlighted before, everybody I think at this point is tired of hearing that, like, the snake is the symbol of Egyptian authority. But I would like to people, at least for in the back of their mind, see if they can explain why the white hand without a blemish. That's more of a request than a comment. I would like to have as many ideas as we can because there are ideas as to why God chose that symbol, but nothing so strong that it's like a slam dunk. Um, yeah.
Uh,
Thank you. Thank you.
Add just 2 cents. I've heard this before, and obviously I'm not like fully committed to this, but it does seem to make some sense. A big fear of that time and just that time period in general was this concept of leprosy. And it's kind of the same thing as where it's showing that, look, the God of Moses not only is controlling, as you mentioned, the power of the snake, which was like a significant um, myth in their religion, but also this concept of like leprosy, where he can transform it and heal it instantly. That's a thought. I've heard reasons why that's not the case, but yeah, just like you, I'm open to other people who might have um, insight to why this would be a significant.
Mine's very, like, my understanding was very akin to that, just in terms of control of life and death, right? Like a lifeless body, which would be tied with leprosy, right? Like you lose function or your limbs die, right? But just kind of like showing the control of life and death as an example was how I always saw it.
Well, I
Peace.
think you got. Oh, Douglas, go on.
Go on, Go on, brother Ishmael. You go on. You were first.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think you guys are right when it comes to, like, because God says without a blemish, right? So you guys are addressing that aspect. But why is it white? Thank you.
Yeah, because like
And I,
oh, go ahead, Douglas. My apologies.
okay. Some people exploit this verse, and I'll tell you why I'm using the word exploit. Because people that are preoccupied with complexion, color, they come up with all kinds of ill-informed statements about this sign. But actually, what it means is referring to a disease that we now know today. People, regardless of their pigmentation, there is a skin disease. I don't know the formal name of it, where there's a loss of the natural pigmentation on the surface of the skin. Usually that's indicative of some type of disease, not disease that's spreading, right? Of a malignancy on the skin. So usually, if regardless of the person's complexion, if there is this blemish that signifies some form of illness, or as you all understand what I'm saying here, it signifies some form of illness or pathogen, so to speak. But clearly, this was not the case. This was clearly not the case. So when this was a sign, you see, in a miracle, because it appeared it could be taken as a blemish, but it clearly was not a blemish. Thank you. Peace.
And that loss of pigmentation is sometimes tied to leprosy as well, back to Peter's point. But as Douglas pointed out, it would be blemished, right? Like it wouldn't be just all over your skin without any blemishes. Like that's a very odd thing to see.
A piece, this hand into white without a blemish, was this a one-time trick? I mean, one-time miracle? Like you can't. I'm guessing God did not return it back to a non. Like did God put the blemishes back so that he can repeat the sign, or is it just one sign to Pharaoh and the elders, not repeated, and that's why it was like a battle with the snakes? What do you guys think?
God knows best. I think it was not repeated. I don't think it was repeated. Thank you.
That's my thought. Praise God. You guys ever think about why does he have Moses put his hand into his pocket? Why not just have it turn white before their eyes? Do you think it's like chapter 2, verse 260, where Abraham dice up the birds, put them on different hills, and then call the birds to him, right
My
after
thing
300
that
months?
I've wondered about, because even like the guy that dies and his donkey, like with his donkey and his food, you know what I mean? Like there's always this like moment of not seeing, and then bam, there is the miracle. Shoot, even the 19 miracle, it was a hidden secret. It was nobody could see it. And then bam, here comes the miracle for everybody to observe. There's always this moment of not seeing.
Do you think God puts that little moment of not seeing to allow people to have room to doubt?
I was going to say that, but the snake is like a literal stick turning into a snake.
Yeah,
You know what
because
I mean?
they have magicians trying to do the same thing, and the magicians realize, okay, this is not magic. But the people who are not experts, they thought, no, it still can be magic. The same way people claim Code 19 is numerology, right? They're just not. They're I don't want to say incompetent. They're just uneducated or not an expert at it to know that it's not magic.
What about the camel?
Yeah, I mean, think about it. The camel is able to tell the weekdays apart, right? No, today's my day to drink. Now, they'll say, well, I'm sure we can somehow maybe train an animal to do that,
Yeah, like
right?
he was giving her a signal or something.
Yeah, maybe he's giving the camel a signal to drink on that day. They haven't figured it out.
And they really can't observe it 24/7. They can only, I mean, nobody could sit there for 24/7, or 24 hours of the day to watch this camel. But there still is this um, aspect of, you know, just
Giving them
having to
room.
have faith.
Yeah,
Yeah.
giving them. So the miracles they're meant to serve as assurance for the believers, not to turn disbelievers into believers, right? It's like chapter 2, verse 118. Look at it. It says, those who possess no knowledge say, if only God could speak to us or some miracle could come to us. Others before them have uttered similar utterances. Their minds are similar. We do manifest the miracles for those who have attained certainty. And I think this is why God asks Abraham in chapter 2, verse 260, do you not believe? Right. So Abraham was like, yes, I am one of the believers. Please grant me a miracle. Please, to give me that assurance. Right. And so I think it's connected. I don't know though. I honestly don't know. I want to say that the pocket the because then the Pharaoh will be like, oh, you put some magic medicine in your pocket to make your hand cured. It's not a miracle from God. You're tricking us. Because the Pharaoh could make that claim. The elders can make that claim that somehow in his hand, in his pocket, there's some sort of magical liquid that solves the problem of leprosy or whatever pigmentation problem that he has, and Moses got rid of it, sleight of hand or something.
Peace. Along the lines of what Triple A said, I do something that's silly. Like if I put my hand in my pocket, let's say you get an inspiration, put your hand in your pocket, and this voice tells you that it's going to come out white. And then you take your hand out of your pocket and you look at your hand, you overwhelmed. Your pocket was in your hand was in your pocket. No one had access to it. It was a secret between you and the voice you heard in God. Now, had his hand, for example, for purposes of discussion, had his hand turned white and the rest of them would see it, many of the people would immediately say, what? This is a magician's trick, because they knew the magicians were adept at fooling people, at doing these kinds of things. But by the fact that Moses' hand was in his pocket, they had no access to it. Nothing. Nothing. It was totally, in its you follow what I'm saying. Thank you. Peace.
I hear you, brother. Anyone find the what Moses says about the fire interesting? It says, verse 29, when he had fulfilled his obligation, he traveled with his family towards Egypt. He saw from the slope of Mount Sinai a fire. He said to his family, stay here. I have seen a fire. Maybe I can bring to you news or a portion of the fire to warm you. Now, I don't know if there's some sort of greater symbolism at play here, because we know in the Quran, fire is not just a sign and blessing from God, but it's also one of the ways God describes hell. Right? Is there a way, like, is there a metaphor that I'm missing here? Does anyone see one, or is it just
A little
a
bit,
statement of fact?
but I know Justin said yesterday, I think, uh, it might just be a practical issue in the sense of like, that's how people exchange news. Back then, like you're walking in the desert, nobody is around, and then you see like a caravan or something. You stop, you kind of exchange information. Maybe you need something, maybe they need something. But what I'm curious about is, do you think this could be fear from Moses? Because, if you want your family to be warm, you take them to the fire, like uh maybe he thought, look, I don't know what these people are at the fire, so I'm just gonna keep my family here in case these guys are crazy or something. I don't know. That's what comes to mind.
Easier to defend himself on his own than to defend the whole family, right?
Yeah. Or maybe if they get to him, they don't get to his family, right? Like, maybe.
But look at chapter 20, verse 10. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, brother or sister.
No, go ahead, brother. After you then.
When he saw fire, he said to his family, "Stay here. I have seen a fire. Maybe I can bring you some of it, or find some guidance at the fire." I find like it's yeah. So I do think what Brother Justice said about it being a way an outpost for people to exchange information, maybe some news or I don't know map of details. But it's funny that God uses the word guidance here.
Could be just for the safety reason, because that time they didn't have the fire extinguishers, right? It can spread rapidly. So maybe it was just for the safety reason.
One interesting tidbit is in the Arabic here for he saw from the slope and I have seen a fire. It's actually it's not the same word you see elsewhere for seeing something with your eyes. The word that's used is like more like perceive. But if you look at the root, it says to see feelings of warmth, of affection and love, be sociable, be friendly, be familiar with. Like it was something about it that was drawing him towards the fire, kind of like a moth to a light. And I just see this concept where, God says we have to turn our face, our being, our direction towards God, and it's because he had that light in him. He became attracted to whatever this was, but he has the sense that, hey, this is something good, but he's not sure what it is, right? Like, even what he's telling his family, I seen a fire. Maybe I can bring to you news or a portion of fire to warm you. But he sees this as something positive, and my guess is it's just that concept where because he's righteous, he's going to be attracted to the right direction, to the right things. And for whatever reason, he had this cognition that this was a good thing. This is something that is like drawing him in.
That kind of inspiration, you mean?
Yeah, more than because inspiration is like, hey, you just have a muse. Something triggers an idea. But being directed towards something, right? Either being directed towards righteousness or unrighteousness. Um, that is more with it. It's dependent on what's inside us. If I love the things that God loves, I'm going to be attracted to the things that God loves. You know, and I see this concept where it's like, yeah, I'm trying to think how to, this thing that used to be in like kids cartoons where they'd have a stick and it'd be able to find water in the desert. I kind of see that
Dousing,
with like, what's that?
dousing, dousing. Like
Dowsing.
yeah. So basically, the righteous people may have an internal was it dousing compass towards like the right path, by God's leave, kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
You
It's
know,
like they're drawn to it, you know?
I use that word inspiration because this is one of the ways we see in the Quran that God communicates with us, right? By sending a messenger, and one of them is the inspiration. So that's why it came in my mind.
Yeah, to further kind of affirm that, like when Moses was looking for something, right, with the crossing of the two rivers, it was the fact that like the servant that he had didn't bring provisions from the river where they had provisions, right? And instead of seeing it as like, oh, it's just something that happened, he's like, okay, well, we have to go back, right? Like he saw it as guidance to go back. That's where they were looking for. So going back to this scenario, right? Like he says, maybe I can find some guidance. He already affirms the fact that like everything is done by God, and like nothing is by happenstance, nothing is by coincidence. Like there's a reason why this fire is here and why I'm witnessing this actually being here, right? So I got to go and investigate, or at least that's how I see it. God knows best.
Praise God. I think we're all overlapping with what we're saying. I think it's a theme in the Quran, essentially being open-minded and seeking out the guidance. And the worst position to be in is when you believe you're right and you're resistant to any new knowledge or guidance that can improve your situation, right? So the believers having that compass in their heart, looking for ways to improve, to better themselves. I believe Brother Peter is absolutely correct. Like Moses, he was indeed trying to be a righteous person, and he was righteous even before that point. Right? He took righteous actions. He transformed over time, and the more he transformed, I think the better his his dowsing compass became. Right? And in the Quran, we have these things like yeah, I cited a couple of verses. Um, he turned away from them, saying, "O my people, I have delivered my Lord's message to you and advised you, but you do not like any advisors." Sheba, she said, "O my advisors, I have received an honorable letter." She said, "O my advisors, counsel me in this matter. I am not deciding anything until you advise me." Right? So we got to remember, since God is guiding us, He is the ultimate advisor. Right? And the believers, they love being advised to be better. Right? This is why
Yeah.
in chapter 2, verse 88, it says, "Some would say our minds are made up. Instead, it is a curse from God as a consequence of their disbelief that keeps them from believing, except for a few of them." And in chapter 6, it says, whomever God wills to guide, he renders his chest wide open to submission. This is like the dousing mechanic that Brother Peter was talking about, that their chest is wide open to submission. And whomever he wills to set astray, he renders his chest intolerant and straitened, like one who climbs towards the sky. God thus places a curse upon those who refuse to believe. Someone who's not willing to accept submission, they may see that fire and just ignore it.
I have a question, and like kind of going down to the same understanding. God knows best, but like, is a lesson we can learn from this is like, if we see a possibility of benefit, regardless of the possible difficulties, because like if there's a fire, as mentioned beforehand, like there was an apprehension, right? Like, stay behind. I'm going to go check it out, right? Maybe I can grab some of this warmth or grab some news, right? So it's a scary thing. You're in the wilderness, like essentially you're the only security for your family, and you don't know what's at this fire. It could be a bunch of dudes just, with bad thoughts in their head, right? But he goes anyway, trusting in God. Is that kind of the lesson we should learn? Is if there's a possibility of benefit that we see, we should strive towards it and just trust in God in that aspect. Is that kind of like a lesson we can derive from this?
Yeah, peace, Justin. I believe it's a process, it's like God is teaching us step by step as we move forward. I think most of us have experienced it actually in our lives in different situations, and this increases our certainty. And as we grow, as our souls grow, we trust God, and when your level of awareness increases, so you pay attention to all the certain things that are happening in our life, because we know God is in full control. He controls the circumstances, people you meet, everything. So it's like developing. I'm sure that many of us has experienced this. Even myself, there would be before submission. There was one guy. He was just coming to me to show me a documentary. I was ignoring him. I don't know the guy. He was just living in the same building. That time I was single. He keep after me until he shared the documentary about that, Satan in music industry, this and that. And that was the beginning where I start looking for basically religion or the way of life. And he disappeared. He moved to another building. And at that point of time, he was there in that building, and he kept after me. He introduced that documentary, and I saw some good signs in that, and he disappeared. So God controls all these circumstances, people whom you meet, and as we go, our souls grow, we can detect that, basically, God willing.
Peace be upon you all. God bless you. I want to make a comment on verse 22, still on trusting in God. The word that, triggers my mind is the word that, Moses uttered and said when he said, "May my Lord guide me in the right path." So I have this in mind, maybe wherever we want to go as believers, those who believe in God, those who are righteous, wherever you want to go, whenever you want to leave your house, your office, your place of business, wherever you want to go, I think it would be a very good thing for us to always call God to guide us to do the right thing, to be on the right path, because Satan can, distract us from doing what some of the good things we should do. And even when we are lost, like Moses was lost here, he said, "May my Lord guide me to do, to the right path." He never knew that he would even meet this woman. That was the first test he faced. And because he has asked God to guide him to do the right thing, to go to the right path, when he immediately saw this woman, he obliged to help these people. That is one good direction that God is guiding him to the right path. He never knew that he would even fall into the hands of someone whom he would live with and thereafter, he would become a messenger of God. He never knew he would even have a wife there from that house. So God, direct us to the right path to get what is good for us to, be able to stand on a footage that is, on God's path. So whatever we want to do, let us ask God always to guide us on the right path. And secondly, I want to ask a question. We know that when God forbade Moses from accepting any woman that they brought to feed him until his mother came to his rescue, does it mean that Moses' mother and Moses lived in Pharaoh's house, to be well taken care of by Pharaoh until he grew up to become a man, and until he, punked somebody and left or ran away? I'm just out of, curiosity, just asking. Maybe because Pharaoh's wife said this can be a joyous time for us. We may adopt him to be our son. I know she wouldn't allow the nursing mother to take him away to her house to, breastfeed him or take good care of him. Something like that. I was just thinking, maybe if somebody may have a better idea. Thank you.
So it reminds me of a joke. If I remember where share these, but it's okay. So there was a lady, okay, and she's very poor, and she's praying desperately for food because she has no food. And her neighbor upstairs, hears her praying. He's an atheist. He's like, man, this dumb lady, she keeps praying to this invisible god and asking for food. You know what? I'm gonna play a trick on her. So the atheist neighbor goes to the grocery store, buys a bunch of food, and delivers it to the house. So she knocks on the door and runs away. And then the person opens the door, is like, "Oh my God, thank you. God, you answered my prayers." And the neighbor jumps out and says, "No, you idiot. It was me. I bought you the food." And then the lady says, "Thank you, God. You even had Satan pay for it." it to me, it's kind
That
of
is
this.
interesting. Yeah.
It's kind of the
Oh.
same thing here, right? Like, God is having Pharaoh set up his own doom. He's bringing this child into his house. He's like raising it, caring for it, teaching it, and he thinks this whole time he's the one in control. He controls life and death. He's the one who controls, the rivers that flow beneath them. And it's like, no, bro, you're setting up yourself for your own disaster. And God is going to reverse, turn the tables on you, and see that everything that you've done is actually been setting up your own destruction.
Yeah, I just realized, didn't this also happen with Rashad Khalifa? He discovered the code in a brewery kind of thing. They had a supercomputer and it was under the devil's nose. He's not even realizing it, right?
Yeah, yeah. And this is like it goes to show, this expression, oh, so and so is playing 4D chess. That when it comes to God, God's holding all the cards. Like, you're not going to pull a fast one on God. You're not going to, find a loophole in God's system. It's only the arrogant who think such things. People who don't understand God. They think somehow that they're, going to be able to outmaneuver God, who's controlling everything, who's dictated everything. And I know we brought it up, but it's like it's so applicable as the example, the coyote and the roadrunner. Most people in their the life are the coyote. Like, we watch this cartoon and we laugh. We're like, stupid coyote, doesn't realize, like, the animator of this series is never gonna allow him to win. But it's the same thing in life. God wrote down everything. He controls everything. People who scheme are only scheming against themselves. That's the reality, because everything they're going to do is just going to backfire against them.
And the reason is also given in the Quran. The only reason people refuse or they don't see the truth is ego, and they're not sincere. Deep inside, they do not believe in the hereafter. Like Pharaoh earlier, you give the example. These guys were obsessed with death and mummification, and so pharaohs know that so many before him they passed away, and but still he's claiming like kind of a god something. So the arrogance or the ego kind of make that barrier or that hijab that they cannot see the truth or accept it. Because
got
sincere people will reflect, right? Like AAA said earlier. They will reflect. They will when there's a message or their information, they look at it sincerely. But these believers, it's not that. The priorities themselves basically, and their ego is preventing them from seeing the truth.
If you take the analogy of our beliefs become the seed for our deeds, um, whatever it is that we're keeping inside our hearts, the recesses of our mind that we don't even we forget that that's the kernel we planted. Eventually, that fruit is going to come to fruition. And we're gonna see, for ourselves, like, okay, did I plant good seeds or bad seeds? And that's really what it comes down to. It's like you have this. God is giving us the message and a way to purify this seed. And if you utilize it, yeah, it's going to draw you towards good things. It's going to draw you towards good outcomes. Things are going to work out in your favor, and you're going to get good deeds from it. But if you corrupt that seed, you're going to basically do things that are only going to end up hurting yourself.
I Another lesson here is, can we do anything? Can we help people without asking them to pay us? Like we have seen Moses here. He would have taken advantage of the weakness of this woman and say, okay, I watered for you, you have to pay me. But he never did that. He did it for God's sake, and he went back and sat somewhere and asked God to pay him. That he's in their need for whatever provision God will send to him. Subhanallah. And immediately God sent this woman to him because the father had to invite him to pay him for doing what he did for his daughters. So we should ask ourselves, can we help when we see people who cannot do anything by themselves? Can we help them and ask God to pay us instead of asking the people to pay us? Yes, we can do that. We can do that. And God will always be there for us when we are in need. God is always there. And He will answer our prayer. Thank you.
Peace. So it is a good habit to do good deeds to seek credit with God. Absolutely. And Moses ends up doing this. He says, God, whatever provision you have, I'm in dire need of it. Right. But, and this is one of the reasons I think that Moses, in my opinion, he probably found the servant of God before this because this is a lesson he learned. I would say this is a lesson he learned from that servant of God. Right. Because he was we're talking about they often refer to him as but that's not his name in the Quran. So they went when they reached a certain community. They asked the people for food, but they refused to host them. Soon they found a wall about to collapse, and he fixed it. Moses said, "You could have demanded a wage for that." Right, and so it's funny because I it's my opinion that he had learned this lesson before he met the girls at the well. Right, and this is where he knows to seek provisions from God. He does not always need to ask people for a wage. Praise be to God.
Yeah, the example here is these women were vulnerable, but looking at when he was moving with his teacher, I think the people in the community are not that vulnerable. Maybe that was why he said they could ask for, payment. But these women were vulnerable. When we meet people who are vulnerable, should we take advantage of them? That is the lesson I've learned here. No, that is what I'm trying to say by God's grace. Thank you.
Yeah. Think about this is there was they do these experiments where they'll have like a you fill out a survey, you do a certain task, and they say, okay, hey, we'll give you $20, and you can either use this $20 for yourself, or you can gift it to someone else, right? And you pick a friend, you get them a gift or something like that. And what they did is they followed up with these individuals, and they said, hey, how much did you enjoy, either if you purchased something for yourself versus if you gave it for someone else? What you find is that if you do something for yourself, like let's say I got a burger, I'll enjoy it for that moment, and then I'll, maybe I'll think back to it. Oh yeah, that was a tasty burger, but it kind of fades away, right? But the people who actually gave the $20 to someone else for, bought someone else a burger, gave someone else a card or a candle or whatever, right? They remembered that and they felt more joy from it for a longer duration. And it's one of these things like in Surah 28. This one, when God talks about Karun, it says, don't neglect your share in the here in this life, but the objective is the plan for the hereafter. And I think that's the whole point. Is like, look, when you do things for the sake of other people, you're gonna get a lot more benefit than if you do it only for your own sake. And it's kind of the same thing here, right? Where Moses is putting the needs of someone else first, and God's reward to him from this act is he gave him a job, he gave him a wife, he gave him shelter, security, everything he wanted, for this simple deed. Because it showed that, Moses wasn't in it just for the money, just for that quick gain. He had higher ambitions. And because of that, think of this. It's like God is a venture capitalist. And he says, okay, I'm going to put my investment into this individual because clearly he's taking these loans of righteousness from God and doing God's work in this world. So it's the same thing for us. We can take a loan from God and go and be of service to other people. And God seeing that investment, he's going to give us more.
I have a question, please, family. 26, when talking about Moses' marriage, and the dowry here is that Moses worked for 8 or 10 years or 10 pilgrimages. This sign says a signal to me that whatever dowry we're going to pay, the man is going to pay on the woman he's going to marry must be something very, very reasonable, something very good. Like the messenger of the covenant would say, is the security for the woman. Looking at my community here where I live, the dowry they set for the woman is nothing to write home about. But as submitters who had, um, taken this path before we got to know about this, what do we do now? Are we going to? Because let me cite an example with myself. What I paid was nothing. Looking at this verse, what I paid to my wife was nothing, absolutely. And she would never have that as her own security because it's nothing to write home about. I want to ask this question. Does it mean that now that I got to know this, I have to set a better dowry for her? Or what do I do? Thank you.
In the Quran, I mean, this is kind of tangential, but it explicitly says any adjustment to the dowry, as long as both parties are, happy with it, is, you're still within what's permissible. But from your question, you're saying, hey, should I go back and increase this now that you have more knowledge and understanding? Is that correct? Put in the verse really quick. 24, it's the last sentence. It says, thus, whoever you like among them, you shall pay them their dowry decreed for them. It says, you commit no error by mutually agreeing to any adjustment to the dowry. God is omniscient, most wise.
Yes. But this time around, it was the father that, negotiated for his daughter. The man too can negotiate with his wife. But
There's
Syria,
another lesson I
yeah.
take from this agreement that Moses has with his father, future father-in-law. It's this concept where, we want to get married, right? We encourage marriage, but at the same
Mm.
time, it's something that it's like, look, it's a big decision. Don't just rush into it. That he's making this commitment for 8 pilgrimages, um, or 8 years, is that he's showing that it's like, look, he's not necessarily, um, he's in it for the long run in that sense. And I used to think that he didn't get married until the end of the period, but I don't believe that anymore. I might be wrong, but just this concept where it's like, look, he has this opportunity to get job security, get some wealth, be able to provide a dowry. That's what the job is giving him, and it's something that he's working towards. I don't know what you
Yeah,
guys think.
yeah. We have discussed this some years back, and somewhere also of the opinion that after negotiating with the father, he took his wife with them and then still went ahead to, fulfill his this agreement.
Can someone give me an indication that you can hear me?
Yeah,
We
we
can
can
hear
hear.
you, yeah.
Like,
Uh,
what
do
else
you
can
not
I hear?
hear Brother Ibrahim?
No, no, I don't. Is he talking?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, my bad. Here, let me drop off and go back. I was very confused. My apologies.
Okay. Okay. Are you back, brother?
Yes, okay, okay. I didn't know if you were talking or not, so I don't want to say, yeah, I can hear you now. My apologies. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Great. Okay. What I was saying is, in our community here, we did when we were having a Quran study years back. Some of us were of the opinion that after reaching this agreement with the father, um, even before Moses should, finish his assignment to fulfill this agreement, that he took his wife with him. But if we look at the verse, the father said, until you do this, right? He said, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. He said, I wish to offer one of my two daughters for you to marry in return for working for me for 8 pilgrimages. So I don't believe that Moses would have violated this to go with his wife, or the father would have given him the wife before fulfilling this. And I think this is why God is telling us this. So, and you have to pay the dowry before the woman becomes your wife, right? The moment you pay, so since this agreement was the dowry, if he had not fulfilled this agreement, I don't think he would have gone with the wife. And God told us it was when he fulfilled it that he had to even travel with his wife, because he didn't stay there anymore. He took his wife with him. So this is my understanding. But maybe somebody may have something better to share with us. Let us pray.
I guess peace. So I mean, in the example, in return for working the 8 pilgrimage, I mean that effectively constitutes a contract. And so what's interesting is Quranically, there's effectively 3 stages to this marriage process in which it's a little bit different than the way that we think about it today. The first stage is where there is basically the engagement, the solemn pledge, etc., and there is no dowry yet set, and there's the commitment. And at that point, if you leave, you divorce. At that point, you can actually divorce the wife before the dowry is set, before any of that. And if you divorce at this point, you owe them an equitable compensation, the rich as he can afford and the poor as he can afford. The second stage is now the dowry is set. And with the dowry set at that point, now you can you still go through the divorce process, and there's a different divorce if you choose to separate. And at that point, the compensation comes half of the agreed upon dowry, and if you choose to split. And then finally, the final stage where basically everything is completed is the full dowry has been paid, and at that point, like if you divorce, you cannot you cannot take the dowry back, right? You can't give back them anything that you have earned. I think this was what 421, if I recall off the top of my head, something like this. And so we have these different stages of progression in a married relationship. The first stage is typically called engagement because it's just there's not a better word for it, but it's effectively the first stage of being married. Um, and when you actually look at the verses, when you're looking at for instance, a concept like consummation of the marriage, it's really not strictly said at which stage. Logic says, okay, the dowry's got to be set and like it's in contract and things of this nature. But like there's not an explicit verse that says X, Y, or Z. We're actually looking at this in big detail. And so when Rashad talks about the purpose of the dowry and the purpose that dowry and love are both required for a marriage to be valid, um, what he specifically says about the dowry is that it's for her security. And so there's a level of subjectivity to that. That subjectivity of what is her security it could be like for someone who's in their 40s, that could be a house. For someone in their early 20s, that could be a couple $1,000s. I mean, I would say that, I wouldn't go less than like a 10 or something like this, but like there's a purpose behind. God kind of gives wiggle room here. And this is why whenever he talks in these verses, like he uses things like, um, he's the hearer, the omniscient. He sees, he's watching, like he constantly brings remembrance back to him in all interactions with this, because a malicious person, the reality is a malicious person could take advantage of all these like wiggle room that God gives you. But a true believer is going to do things on the up and up. And I think the wisdom here falls back on that. Number one, God is here omniscient. He's the seer of all things. And that at the end of the day, like if you're a submitter, you're a believer, like you're going to take care, at least from, I can speaking from a man's perspective, like it's hard for me to imagine a scenario where you truly love, which is one of the two requirements, love and dowry, the other person, if you're not like sincerely trying to look out for their perspective and what that security is. Like, when I think about it at my age, at 38, at a more, at just more mature thing, having been married once before, prior to submission, my thought process along the line is like, okay, like I need to set up a dowry that would like, okay, provide for contingencies for her retirement, contingencies for her home, contingency for like if I'm there or not, or things that'll put her mind at ease. And that's a very different equation. And fortunately, especially in the modern era, and one of the reasons why I think God kind of leaves us open ended is, this is timeless, right? Um, you look at the Moses example, that's effectively a contract of work for the 8 pilgrimages to have an income, to help the family, to have something steady, reliable, close to the Father. So it's all on the up and up. And then if we look at that model in terms of a financial contract nowadays, those financial contracts, especially in the United States, are worth their weight in gold. Like they're not just, financial contracts and marriage contracts are not something that are to be taken lightly. People, they are binding, they are powerful, and you can effectively, uh, with the right dowry agreement as a prenuptial agreement, effectively, guarantee, if in the case of the divorce, things like alimony, things like all these things, and you can't really get out of them. So there is, this, so there's I've spoken a lot on this, other people take on this, but God gives a lot of mercy, a lot of grace, a lot of things for you to do the right thing. I see like this marriage is a formidable test of your integrity and your submission, and if you're going to do things on the up and up at every stage. Peace.
Also, I wanted to make a comment, right? Maybe the dowry wasn't the fulfillment of those years, but basically the promise to do so, right? Like, does anybody remember the I think, okay, I don't want to like speak from memory here, but I recall there being a audio of the messenger of the covenant saying, like, the wife can just basically set the conditions however she likes, right? So if she accepts that the condition is that the husband provides the promise of working, then that possibly could be satisfactory as well, and like abiding by the law that God has set in the Quran. Maybe. That's just my memory. Thank you.
So I appreciate every point made here on this discussion of dowry, because whatever we do, we have to, look at what God has commanded us to do. Adjustment to the dowry is very important, but the dowry, no matter what, must be something good for the security of the woman. If I, if I'm not going to maybe uh, pay another dowry or adjust it, or I think looking at my own end, I may decide to do something better again for her. But most importantly, what I'm looking at is when we come to marry out our daughters, what do we do? This is why I am also asking to get to know better, because we must follow God's command. Moses was not raped when he had to work for 8 pilgrimages or 10, as it may be. He was not raped, but he had to fulfill this agreement to be able to get a wife. So no matter what, the dowry for the woman must be something very reasonable for her to hold on to as our own security. In case of divorce, we can fall back on that. I think this is one of the most important things we have to look at. If we have daughters that we want to give out, or if we have sons that would marry somebody's daughter, we must have to pay the dowry to the woman, to the lady that our sons are going to marry, or to the woman, they must bring home. It has to go around this way. I just want us to look at it and then correct whatever mistakes we have done in the past. Thank you.
Peace. Even in verse 28, 29 mentioned when he fulfilled his obligation, he traveled with his family. That means at that time he had family towards Egypt. Just if it came in my mind, this verse. So once he fulfilled the obligation, he traveled with his family. But I agree with what Brother Francis mentioned.
So I was just looking at that as you posted it, Roger. I just posted that verse in there. It's verse 28, 29. I'll just read it real quick. Seek refuge in God from Satan rejected. When he had fulfilled his obligation, he traveled with his family towards Egypt. He saw from the slope of Mount Sinai a fire. He said to his family, "Stay here. I have seen a fire. Maybe I can bring to you news or a portion of the fire to warm you." So obviously, if he has a family at that point, that kind of requires the step of consummation. And in 28:28, there's the confirmation between the Father and Moses. He said, "It is an agreement between me and you. Whichever period I fulfill, you will not be averse to either one. God is the guarantor of what we said." Actually, that wasn't. I was at the end of 27 where he says, "I don't wish to make this matter too difficult for you." So it's it's the agreement with them, and I think that's, if you contextually look at the wisdom here too. Like, the father's just not giving his daughter to a random person that's going to go off and like promise to pay him. I mean, they're working together throughout the 8 pilgrimages. So there's a degree of security that the father has and the family has that Moses is marrying into to fulfill this obligation, this contract. Like he's, the next tent over, right? And so contextually that tells us, there's security there. It's like, that's a little bit harder to, I guess he could have I guess Moses could have run away in the night, right? But, yeah, that's a pretty reasonable agreement, a pretty safe, assumption, between all the parties involved. It's not like Moses and his daughter are being sent off somewhere else away from the father and they don't know anything, Peace.
So what you are saying is two things must have happened here. Either the father allowed Moses to consummate the marriage before the dowry was paid. That's what I'm trying to say. Maybe before he fulfilled his obligations of 8 pilgrimages, maybe on credit, Moses took his wife to be with him. He consummated the marriage. If I don't understand, or maybe because they are righteous people who have fear of God, Moses wouldn't violate such an agreement. But though he has consummated the marriage, would that happen?
424, brother, mentioned that, you commit no error by mutually agreeing to adjustment to the dowry. So unless if you think it cannot be made like in time, even the traditional Muslims, of course, we are not following them, but they can set the time. Like they agree on a dowry and they can decide like what to pay now. Let's say the guy will say, okay, I pay half now, half later. But the important is the agreement with the dowry, I think. Based on verse 424.
1 second. Can you hear me?
Yeah, brother, Faddal.
Peace be upon you. Yeah, so in chapter 2, verse 32, we see that when we transact loans, we can write it down, right? So, God has given his blessing for taking out loans and writing down these writing down the loans that are borrowed, right? So a dowry it can be a similar thing in effect. It's like, hey, I can promise you 8 years of work before I marry her, or I can promise you 12 years of work after I marry her. What would you like as your dowry? Right, and and this would be written down, and it'd be binding because you're giving your word and you're signing it on paper. Right, and they're like, yeah, I'd prefer the 12 years after marriage. Also, I want it in there that I get to name the first grandkid. You know, this could always, like, the dowry can be a lot of things, but it is not. It can be paid even after the marriage if that's what's agreed upon.
And there were multiple females, I think sisters, and imagine this guy living there, Moses living there, females there, and I don't know.
I agree.
When you put yourself in a real life situation, makes sense.
I agree with you, AAA, that based on that agreement, a man can pay the dowry much later. Yes, and he can take his wife. I agree with that. As long as that agreement is reached, yeah,
As
righteous
for Moses,
people.
I don't know.
Yeah,
As for Moses, I don't know if he did the 8-10 years before or after the marriage. I like to
yeah.
think he did. I think he did the 8 to 10 years after marriage because I think it would be a little bit cruel to have both his daughter and his future son-in-law to just live under the same house for 8 to 10 years without being married. It's just. I
You
feel like
gotta think
that
that
would be
wouldn't be
weird.
equitable either, right? It's like at some point, it's like we're talking about risks on both ends. It's not. That's also not equitable to Moses because it's like, okay, you got to basically withhold pay. Effectively, the wife is the payment, right? At that point, in return for the work. And it's like, okay, so now it's just Moses it's like completely trusting the father to uphold his end for the whole part of it. There's no equitability between the two parties at that point. Moses is totally at their mercy.
By the way, I didn't want to stipulate. We always see the promise of 8 or 10 years pilgrimage, but there may have been additional conditions. Be like, okay, hey, after the first 2 years, you can marry her. Like, it's just not included in the Quran. It's just not relevant to our guidance, right? So it's just
Yeah.
But to me,
go
yeah,
ahead.
to me, these verses are very, very clear. It is an agreement reached that the father said until he does this before he will give him his daughter, one of his daughters, until he fulfills this in return, then he will give him his daughter. This is to say that the father has not given him the daughter until he has fulfilled this. And furthermore, we saw that when he fulfilled this, that was when he traveled with his wife, with his family. When
Brother,
he
which
fulfilled
verse
it,
mention until the pilgrimage is over? Which verse you're referring to?
come again, brother.
Which verse you're referring to that is mentioned until he?
No.
Yeah.
I'm speaking about verse 27. He said, I wish to offer one of my two daughters for you to marry in return for working for me for 8 pilgrimages. In return until he fulfills this. And God is telling us here it will be voluntary on your path. That is if he does 10 or stops at 8. But God is telling us until he fulfilled this, that was when he traveled with his wife, right? With his family.
No, that until is not that. This is what the agreement they're making. So as long as he's bind with the agreement and promise to fulfill it, so the agreement is made. And I'm
Peace.
trying to understand if they made this dowry agreement, and if he, let's say, and marry, and let's say, and like AAA said, maybe we don't know about that. A year before that, 8 years. I'm trying to find out what's wrong with that.
Okay, Brother Douglas, you want to make a
Peace. Yeah.
comment?
Verse 29, right? I
Mm.
seek refuge in God from Satan who rejected. When he had fulfilled his obligation, he traveled with his family. A husband and wife don't constitute a family in this context. They obviously, by God's leave, had children by then. He fulfilled his obligation per work. The obligation had to do with the work,
That's
assisting
right.
his father-in-law. Uh, and then he traveled with his family, his wife and child or children. So it's not, God is very clear, at least to me, God is very correct. There's no ambiguity here. And I believe it's Peter, someone said a moment ago, it would be somewhat cruel and really contrary to what we know in terms of the Quran and equitability to have Moses working all of this time and not having married his wife, not having married her, to make 8 years of work a prerequisite for marriage. No, that's not what this says. The 8 years or whatever work was not a prerequisite for marriage.
Praise
At
be to
least
God.
God knows best. Praise be to God, I think. Thank you. God knows.
May God increase our knowledge and wisdom.
Yeah. The way the English actually reads is, I want to give you one of my daughters, and then in return, if you work for me for 8 pilgrimages. So it's actually, the logic's actually the other way around. He's offering the daughter as incentive to work for him for 8 pilgrimages. In the order of that exchange, and to like tighten it up to it.
Just a quick question. We talked with Brother Francis also, and what do you guys think? Dowry being financial transaction that fits the chapter 2, the longest verse in the Quran. Do you think the dowry should be witnessed with two people? Thank you.
Yes.
If it's written as a loan, then it's obligated, right? If I mean, I personally say, is it like, if you're just paying them cash or whatever, there's no explicit requirement at that point because there's no agreement at that point. It's just, okay, here, I'm going to give you the dowry and so on and so forth. When I make a contract to pay you a dowry, I'm effectively making a loan from the wife to pay them, and that requires the financial transaction. That said, I think it would be wise to always have it witnessed. I think it would be wise that you should do those things. There's a reason why that wisdom is there, but in terms of a strict requirement, um, that verse specifically talks about you shall write down the loan transactions, and then business transactions can be executed on the spot. But that's just a personal take. I mean, I would still say no matter what, you should get the two witnesses.
I don't think, peace be upon you. The important part, I think, some people from Iran may correlate with what I'm saying more, is that in Iran, there's a tradition that people write for example, number of gold coins to be given to the spouse as a dowry in the marriage certificate. But the problem is that nobody, almost I would say, like almost no one, actually has that amount of money or coins in their possession at the time of marriage. So this is a promise for the time that they will be given. The problem with that is that type of contract is that, what if they never be able to fulfill that? And this is basically a false promise, a false contract. They can never afford this. And most probably, even if they work toward affording this, what if something happens and, and they can, they get divorced before they will be able to fulfill that. So it is important for for us at least to know that this is the wrong way of doing this. We should, if even if there is something that you have in your possession, if it's a property, if it's a car, if it's a money, it has to be able to be transferred to the spouse before consummating the marriage, or written in which it's transferred to that person. So the person doesn't have to think about, I have to work or give some false dowry value just to, you know, save face in the family and friends, but no intention of really paying it off. And if something happens to the husband, even if he has all the right intention to pay it off and he dies, whatever, for an accident, the spouse never receives the support that she needs. At least she will never receive it fully. So I think it's important that this contract is written in a way that is transferable in the marriage certificate or in the marriage when the marriage is consummated.
So my kind of the way I understand was if there is a loan that has been made transaction, you have a debtor, and the one who will pay this money back, right? Because the whole point of the writing down is so you both sides don't forget that they made this agreement and one side will pay it back. So when you look at the spirit of law, my question is how come dowry can be used in this matter when the woman has nothing, like they don't have to pay it back, which they don't pay it back, my understanding.
Peace.
Unless she has committed
They
a
committed
proven
proven
adultery.
adultery. Yeah. Peace be upon you guys. So from what I understand, you do have to have witnesses for it, right? It is a financial transaction. Essentially, the man is saying, "Hey, here's money, and what I'm getting from you, the exchange is that I expect that you will be honoring me in my absence, etc., right? That's what I understand. There's an exchange involved here, right? So that there's no issues with, hey, I was given the dowry, I wasn't given the dowry, there was a partial dowry, or anything of this nature. Like when you're giving money, from what I understand, you're supposed to have it witnessed, whether it's business related or not. If I lend my friend $20, like if I lend Salami $20 and I expect to have it back, I'm supposed to have that like witness. You know what I mean? Or even it's funny. Even it says business transactions you conduct on the spot. Like if I'm buying apples and stuff like that, right? It says you don't have to write it down, but you have to at least have a witness. No, the great thing is now we have receipts, right? So it's written down automatically, and you can pull that up as a record. And plus, if you use credit cards, it shows that, hey, I bought something at this store at this day and this time, and so on and so forth. So we have something even better than a witness. But even financial transactions, like if you just buy stuff, or whatever, you're supposed to at least have a witness. So from what I understand, you're also supposed to have witnesses for the exchanging of the dowry, right? This is a transaction that's being taken place, and there are conditions upon it, right? Which, if it's violated, you have every right to take it back, kind of a thing. So, but that's just my understanding. God knows most.
Is brother regular business transactions you said need witness, or
Yeah,
it's
it
just
says
need to be written down?
yeah, it's in 282. It says where is it here? Business transactions you execute on the spot need not be recorded, but have them witnessed. So, from what I understand, this is like me and you. We make a deal, we make an exchange. It's not like a period of time. It's not like a loan that happens over a period of time. It's on the spot. It's one and done. Saying have them witnessed, right? So then later, like for example, you say, "Hey, I'm gonna buy this from you for this much." Okay, well here's a check. Boom, and then later you say, "Oh, you never paid me for that still," and then say, "Oh, wait, what? I did pay you. I gave you a check," and then blah blah blah. So saying at least have it witnessed, because when there's money involved, things are being exchanged. It's good to have some kind of proof that things actually happened and the recipient got what he deserved and the buyer got what he deserved and things like that. That's what I understand from these verses.
I would agree with the spirit of the law, right? Like I said, I think no matter what, like you should, for all the valid reasons that you said, that like it should be. But I mean, if we look at the precision of the language, it's talking about the transacting of a loan in which you have to have the two witnesses. And so, I would have to say, like, at some point, it's like, because then, what happens is that people get into, all right, well, then now you need to have a marriage contract, you need to have all this, when, even the clarification was the only requirements for marriage are love and dowry, right? And so, the question that I pose is like, in this, I think the overwhelming majority of all dowry agreements are going to be some kind of, effectively a loan, because, if I promise to pay a dowry of, I don't know, $50,000 over 2 years or whatever. I'm basically loaning that 50K from my wife, more or less, right? And so that is absolutely within the financial transaction, within the loan transaction. It's absolutely within that's like, okay, the two witnesses. And again, for all the extremely valid reasons you said why it should all be witnessed. But in terms of absolute requirement, I mean, if they just pay a dowry in cash up front, here you go, boom, it's paid, it's set before God. Like, I mean, I don't know if I can just blanketly say that is then now a requirement of an agreement, even though in all cases, again, I would emphasize, like anyone who asks me, I'm like, you should go get that witnessed. You should have it written down. You should, and I would have even said that before the Quran, right? So, um, I guess my point is whether or not it's an absolute requirement in all conditions, um, because I don't know, very, very cautious when the language is specific, if that makes sense.
Mm. Yeah, so the writing down is specifically for the loan, right? Transactions conducted on the spot, you don't have to write it down, just have them witnessed. I'm saying that you have to have the dowry witnessed. I'm not saying it's a loan, right? Uh, Saying you have to have witnesses for the dowry being exchanged, from what I understand. Because it's also interesting that divorce requires two witnesses as well, even though there's no transaction there. But to verify that, hey, these two have indeed separated, they require two witnesses there as well, which I find interesting. But from what I understand, it's a financial transaction. You're giving somebody money in exchange for something, right? This is witnesses are at least required to be present. From what I understand, it could be wrong. Also, I'm not aware of like um, agreements of payments over periods of time as being a law for us. I don't know. Maybe it used to be a law in the past, like with the Moses thing. But the Quran usually says, not usually, it consistently says like, you can like after you've paid them their due dowry, and the paid has always been in the past tense, right? Like as if you've paid them, and then if you can't afford to get married, it says you shall be patient and wait for God to bless you from His provisions. So I'm not aware of like an agreement to pay over a period of time. I'm not aware of that. I know that in the Moses story there's that, right? But that's not necessarily a command that we should that we can do that too. Just more so sharing of what was said. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Back over
well,
to you.
the verse is well, they don't say in the past tense. They actually say actually more future tense. You shall pay them, which is a future tense. So they're like, because we were going over it quite thoroughly the other day. There's actually a bit of ambiguity there in terms of order, in which I would interpret as wriggle room for, God says He'll give you enough rope to, if you have bad intentions and so on and so forth. But we don't see these specific restrictions like that. And in the modern context, like for example, as we talk about guarantee of payment, things like this, I can take out an annuity tomorrow, and basically guarantee a sum of dowry, anywhere for 250,000, 500,000, even $1 million, based on that annuity. That basically costs me between $100 and $200 a month. So in that case, by making that person like the sole beneficiary of said financial agreement and having a financial and having a contract that secures that, like that is worth its weight in gold. That is worth every bit. Like that has enabled me to simultaneously have a contract and who have paid a dowry in the sense of like 250 or 500 or even $1 million, based off of just modern financial tools available, that are common practices. So this kind of, I mean, the way, and we can pull up the verses on the dowry in the language.
Yeah, God willing.
It says you shall pay, so on and so forth. But
Yeah, then the question is the context here that you just have to eventually at some point pay it, or is it that, hey, pay this and then you can receive it? When I look at 3350, for example, it says, "O prophet, O prophet, we made lawful for you your wives, to whom you have paid their due dowry." So for even the prophet, he had to have paid them, and then it was lawful for them. So this is the context that I'm understanding. Even just again, the whole spirit of the law aspect of it too is that the woman has some sense of security. If I agree to partake into a loan and then I default after a year, she no longer has her protection. And then the verse where it says where God says, if you cannot afford to marry them, then wait until God provides you. I don't have to wait for anything. I can just take on a loan and agree to pay some kind of a loan as long as I'm making that payment. Like this is the part that doesn't make sense to me.
Peace, guys. Are we talking about dowry?
Yep.
Yeah. And then 60:10 it says you may ask them for the dowry you had paid, and they may ask you for what they paid. That's just I don't know. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm making it more difficult than it needs to be. I don't know. But from the context and the purpose of the verses, from what I understand, is you have to pay for the dowry, and then they're lawful to you.
Yeah,
I
so
have
in
a question.
6010, that's like that like basically wives have fled from husbands who've already paid, and it's like, okay, they're basically buying the brides more or less, right? Um, so that's like a different context where 424, I see ravaging God from Satan rejected.
What about 3350?
4350. Let's check
No,
it out.
3350, the one with the prophet saying, "Lawful for you are your wives to whom you have paid their due dowry."
What about the verse that says you commit no error by making any adjustment?
Yep, or 4 forfeit,
Oh,
right?
making an adjustment. You can adjust dowries anytime. There's no limit. There's no reason to hold on the payment just because you want to adjust it. You can adjust it as mutually agreed. It's like if like I'm buying something and then we agree that this is worth more or less. We both agree, and I pay a little bit more, for example, for that transaction. But doesn't mean that I had to hold on to that money because we may adjust it in the future. But my original comment was that this is a common practice in Iran, and you can see the ramification of this playing out in the real world when people write down in their marriage contract that they're going to give the wife a certain amount of gold coins, and they never can afford this. They're like huge values. And what happens is the woman goes and puts it in motion, and then they just take the guy and put them in prison because he can't afford it. I mean, and the woman never gets it. The man never. I mean, I understand if you. It would make more lot sense if someone goes and takes a loan from a bank, $50,000, and gives it to a woman, and then the woman receives the money. But I'm indebted with the bank. If I default on my debt with the bank, then the bank will have to deal with me. But the woman still at least receives the money that she was due, and I
Yeah.
have to pay the bank. But if I go on loan with the woman,
Yeah, I
with
agree.
the receiver, that becomes a bigger problem because as you say, what if I default on that? And
Yeah.
what if I
Well,
I don't even intend to pay it, and I want to hold on it, and wait for her to change her mind, whatever scam I can play in this. And I understand the other side as well. You got a lot of people, a lot of women come and get married just to get the dowry, and they want to get out of it. But I mean, that's just comes to the choice. You just got to be smart. You got to be aware of it, who you're marrying, who you're getting involved with, because if
Yeah, but
the
I think
women
that's
comes
confusing.
into it just for that reason, it's a problem.
That's confusing other unethical behaviors. Because I mean, there's a lot wrong with that whole. Like there's a whole lot that's canonically not right about saying, okay, I'm going to make a contract to pay you 50 gold coins, and I know that I can never get the 50 gold coins. I have no intention of ever getting the 50 gold coins. Like there are more severe problems than that. I would argue that the core problem there isn't the violation of the dowry. It's them being, not being just acting immorally to begin with, because basically at that point the whole premise of the marriage at that point is based on a lie,
Yeah,
and
but
any
one
intent
thing,
to go through.
yeah, one thing I would say, it's actually working exactly as it's supposed to be in Iran because they don't treat dowry as a protection for the woman in case she gets divorced. It's a guarantee that the husband does not divorce her, right? So they set some ridiculous amount, like you have to pay me, I don't know, literally like $1 million or $2 million. And I'm talking about like the average worker, right? Not like some rich guy. The average worker
Even
would have
arms and
to,
legs.
yeah, arms and legs, crazy stuff, just to make sure the husband does not divorce them. Like that's the idea that goes through the family's mind, goes through the woman's mind. So yes, I'm just making this as a guarantee that in case he wants to leave me, he has to pay me $1 million. And again, it's exactly working as it's supposed to be in their mind, but it's completely demonic. This is not what it was supposed to be. And regarding how Rashad says, yes, you can give it to them later, my understanding is that that's in the context of a property or something that at that time becomes the woman's, is given to the woman. It's fully hers, but then they both are going to be able to use it. And in case of divorce, she's gonna be the one that gets to keep her. I don't think it makes any sense that you would pay her at any point in the future because that beats the whole purpose of it and it will become so much abused as we have seen in Iran.
So you think Moses is an exception, yeah?
Huh?
Moses, because we were discussing earlier that
I wasn't
worked
here. Yeah.
for Francis, you want to mention that?
Law, right? So we have to follow our law. We know there were some differences between the laws that we had and they had. In the Quranic law, we know dowry must be paid before consummation. That's my understanding. You cannot like start a marriage without paying the dowry. That's just not a possibility. It can be anything. It can be property. It could be Bitcoin, whatever. But there has to be something set and truly given to her, and
Like
it
a
shouldn't be given
monetary
to her
value.
family. Yes, exactly. I heard about a case in Afghanistan that they give the dowry to the father as if they're buying her, as if she's a property. This is completely wrong and demonic too. The money is supposed to go to the woman. Period. No one else. Not her family. Not her father. Is not supposed to be given to her at time of divorce. It's supposed to be given to her at the time of marriage. That's it. And when it comes to abuse, sure, yeah, she could do that. But guess what? Women would prefer to be in a good marriage and have a good reputation rather than to be rich. This is true for most women. And if it's known in a town or society that this woman scammed this guy or is going to scam the other guys, no one's going to ever marry her. No one's going to like her. So I think most women won't do that.
Yeah, brother, I agree with you. Before consummation of any marriage, the dowry must have to be paid. But the dowry can be given to the father. Since it's not the father that is going to use it, if the father will still give the dowry back to the daughter. Handing him the dowry is not the problem, but except if the father is not going to give the daughter the dowry, that is where the problem is. In our society here, the parents collect it and give their daughter the dowry. It's not that they are taking it for their own personal use. Yeah.
So, there's a verse I want to bring attention to because there's this disregard for the Moses example that I don't think that you can disregard. Seek refuge in God from Satan the rejected. This is verse 4:26. God wills to explain things for you and to guide you through past precedents and to redeem you. God is omniscient, most wise. And so I don't think that you can just throw out the example of Moses under the idea that, oh, he's following a different law. When God has explicitly said that he's explaining things and guiding through the past precedents. And, what past precedents is the one that God has specifically put in the Quran to help guide and navigate through these situations. Now, there's 1,000 ways that people that a corrupt heart can totally take advantage of, of any million what ifs with sabotaging the dowry, being oppressive, being abusive, being things like this. But when it comes to matter of requirement in law, we have to be very careful and impose as extra restrictions that are not explicitly there. Because otherwise that leads us down to a path where my favorite example is look at how the Jews make 39 categories of prohibitions on the day of the Sabbath you can't do, which includes things like turning on or turning off a car, when the Bible only gives 3 things that are forbidden on the Sabbath. 1 is work, and the example is given carrying loads. 2, lighting fires in your own home. And 3, baking or boiling, cooking, in other words. And from these 3 things, they use logic to say, okay, you cannot do 39 categories of work or any other things on the day of the Sabbath. And they invent things that make life difficult for them. So in all things, like the guiding principles of the Quran is, okay, it makes it simple, and it's to distinguish between those who are righteous and those who are not righteous. So every time we add layers based on what we think, we add complication that may actually be making otherwise things that are righteous seemingly unrighteous.
But brother,
So what do you
The
think?
example of
What do you think about the verse that says, if you cannot afford to marry a woman, it's better for you to wait, or you marry a slave woman? So if affordability at the time of marriage is not a matter because anyone can promise anything and then fulfill it later, why would you have to wait?
Well, let's pull up the verse. What's the verse?
Brother, I think somebody knows that.
In Surah 4, if you check maybe between 23 to 24, thereabout, Surah 4, you can check it.
All right, so let's read it. I see everything got from Satan rejected. 425. Those among you who cannot afford to marry free believing women may marry believing slave women. God knows best about your belief, and you are equal to one another as far as belief is concerned. You shall obtain permission from their guardians before you marry them, and pay them their due dowry equitably. They shall maintain moral behavior by not committing adultery or having secret lovers. Once they are freed through marriage, if they commit adultery, their punishment shall be half of that for the free women. Marrying a slave shall be a last resort for those unable to wait. To be patient is better for you. God is forgiver, most merciful. So number one, it's saying, okay, marrying the slave. So the context is being patient against, marrying a slave. Better, it seems to be
Yeah.
better to marry a free woman, right? Versus a slave
But
woman.
does it start with the saying you cannot afford? The word
Marry
afford means
free
that there's money involved. The reason they cannot go marry a free woman because they cannot afford to pay the dowry of a free woman.
Sure.
As
And that's
opposed they
super
have to go.
subjective. So that's super subjective, though. It's like what you can afford versus what I can afford may be completely different.
No, but what does it mean if you don't have to pay anything to the woman at the time of marriage? And this could be a just contract that be carried out in the next 20 years. This because you cannot put a term on a loan. You can put 10 years loan, whatever. The point is that affordability seems to be at the time of marriage. If you're saying this affordability is general, I don't know, but I see the affordability is in the context of providing dowry, right? because then you would, if you can't afford something at the time of marriage, then you go marry a slave because then you can afford that. And then God says, well, it's better for you to wait till you can afford it. And
So
waiting for affording, I see it as having the money to be able to pay out the dowry.
yeah. So I mean, a couple things. I mean, we see like I'll just read the other verse 2:24-33. The corrupting God from Satan rejected. Actually, we'll do there's yeah 33. Those who cannot afford to get married shall maintain morality until God provides for them from His grace. Those among your servants who wish to be freed in order to marry, you shall grant them their wish. Once you realize that they are honest, and give them God's money that He has bestowed upon you, you shall not force your girls to commit prostitution, seeking the materials of this world if they wish to be chaste. If anyone forces them, then God, seeing that they are forced, is forgiver, merciful. And so there's a lot, I mean, arguably, there's a lot more here to the afford to get married than specifically the dowry. Because at the point in which the man is expected to be the provider, the breadwinner, and things of this nature, like this whole bucket of afford to be married goes way beyond just the dowry. So this, like at this point, it's like, okay, can you actually provide some kind of basic income? Can you actually provide some kind of basic like life, or are you going to be totally dependent? And so when we're reading these afford verses, I think it's significant that it's not saying like something like afford to pay the dowry. It's being afford to be married because the obligation of the man in marriage is to provide. And so if you cannot afford that, if you cannot afford a livelihood, then you have to wait and be patient. Otherwise, you're totally dependent on somebody else to do the basics. Now, what that afford is going to be is highly subjective to whatever your situation is, if that makes sense. And
Can we
so,
agree that it would have to be base needs, shelter, water, food?
100%.
If you
Yeah,
can't,
I mean,
if you
I
can't
think that's a
afford, yeah.
logical agreement. Yeah, like you know, um, like you, like whatever that is in your society and context and all that, right? Like in an American society, I'd be like, okay, like we kind of have to have our own place. It doesn't have to be an extravagant place, right? And it's like you said, food, shelter, like be able to provide. Like that is a significant commitment, right? Like I can't make a marriage if I can't even provide for another person, let alone like, potential family members coming down, right?
I was a little bit. I was thinking like the Sajjad, but because of Moses' stories, keep me thinking. Because the verse 28, which chapter was it, Francis? It's you clearly see that he made an agreement, and then once he fulfilled his obligation, he took his family. Basically, at that point, he had family. So
Yeah.
that one, yeah, made me think that this was agreed.
Yeah.
But if we're doing it like that, I mean, who he's borrowing or paying back to would be the family. And if you think about it, why is the money going to the father, right? From what I gather is because the father Moses doesn't have a job. He's being provided for by his father, right? The shelter, the livestock, everything is his not his father, sorry, his father-in-law. I keep saying father. His father-in-law was the one that is taking care of them. Moses had nothing; he was broke. He got taken in by his father-in-law and given a wife, saying, "All right, listen, you got to pull your weight. You got to work for me for this many years, plus the dowry." They don't say whatever it is, but from what I understand is because he had nothing, so he was working off kind of a thing, and the money was going to his father, right? So, like, if we're talking about precedents, what is the precedent there? If I want to marry some man's daughter, do I go work for him if I don't have a job? What is the precedent there? Because if we're talking about precedents, this situation is someone who is broke, they have nothing, they have no job, they have no money, and in exchange for marrying somebody's daughter, he went and worked for the gentleman's business for 8 to 10 years,
Yeah. I mean,
right?
so the business owner in this case gets the stability of a good employee for 8 to 10 years, right? And basically, they have now provided, like, so now Moses has been provided with food. He's been provided with shelter. He's been, I mean, he's working for it. Like, it's just as valid
Not
as his
just him,
job
his
as
wife
working for
too.
anybody else, you know? Like, just because the man that he was marrying the daughter from was well off doesn't mean that, like, it was any less valid, right?
Also, another point is that these were righteous people, right? They will not go against God's law. So, but maybe Abraham, Elham also has a point. Maybe that specific situation, because he had nothing, he was just, had no option but to work.
Raju, being righteous and all that stuff is fantastic, right? But the dowry is there because people are unrighteous, right? It's to weed out the unrighteous. That's one of the purposes of the dowry, is to do that, right? So, hey, yeah, in an ideal world, none of us have to provide dowry because all the believing men will provide for their women and won't divorce them, and the women will be righteous believers. There'll be no need to divorce the women, and et cetera, et cetera. But the reason we have these laws set in place is for the protection of believers, and in this specific case, women, right? So, I mean, even if we're going to use that as the precedent is very specific, right? It's the messenger of God, it's Moses, and he's marrying somebody, he has nothing, and he's borrowing from the family, and he's not allowed to leave with this family. Or I don't even know if it doesn't really say that he's not allowed to leave, but I don't know. There are certain details there that I don't know,
But
right?
I wouldn't read in, I don't know
Yeah.
if I'd read into it that like he's borrowing money from that. I mean, basically he's given a job and he's working a job and is like a job is a job. Is it any less valid because his employer is his
No,
wife
it's not.
father?
It's not. I
Like,
agree. It's not less valid, 100%.
yeah.
Because if
You
he
know,
was his son, as a son, he would get a share of it too, right? Like he
yeah.
would get part of it. But as a son-in-law, like he doesn't get anything. Like, you know what I mean? So he would have to be paid wages, 100%.
Yeah, I see that as, you know, like, and the whole lead up to that whole situation is basically they needed help. They were unable to, they couldn't water. Moses waters for them. They say, hey, and then, you know, the daughters are going, you know, he's strong, he's, you know, young, et cetera, whatever.
Honest, yeah.
You know, help out, right? And so like this is a mutually beneficial arrangement. And then so it's like, okay, you have the you know, he's being employed with the means. And you're right. Like I think the value of this example is he's basically poor, he's destitute. God provides him for a way to get married with dignity and to provide for that marriage with, you know, a job and to like, you know, basically not be a beggar about it, right? And
Yeah.
that is in full alignment to me with these verses that says you shall wait, you know, until you can afford marriage. Because afford marriage goes beyond, because I could technically, because of the subjectivity of dowry, I could say, okay, let me pay you, you know, 5 grand, 10 grand, or let me give you this property up front. And then, you know, whatever I want over time, right? Whatever the nature, I mean, or give you nothing over time. You know, you can
Hmm.
structure that agreement in any way that you want, right? Like, in my mind, a more ideal dowry agreement would be like something up front. And, you know, this is just being like older, right? Is
Yeah.
something up front. And then other guarantees that provide for her security over time that are just there as a financial guarantee that
Francis,
has something that has value, you know?
let me put it this way. Like, as far as the affordability, I agree with you, right? Like how a lot of society today works is it's working off of debt. You get what I'm saying? So like owing something is not really a big deal because you go, well, based on how much I make and et cetera, this is an affordable arrangement, right?
Right.
Even if you're just paying all your bills, well, I'm affording everything. I got a house over my head, et cetera, all that kind of stuff, and I'm paying everything on time to what I owe. So that's still affordability. I don't disagree with that. My only thing is that I don't agree with the dowry of, hey, let's get married. I haven't given you what we agreed on yet, but I've promised to give it to you over a period of time. That's my biggest problem. I don't have a problem necessarily with, hey, what's the dowry? This much? Okay, I don't have that much. Here's what I'll do. I'll go pull out a loan. I will give that money to you. It belongs to you. And any defaulter on payment comes back to me not to you. Like if I go you know what I mean? Like that's
Yeah.
that I don't
Well,
have a problem with because there's no chance of the woman becoming victimized. Now, in the situation where, hey, here's the dowry I can't afford, I will pay you over 10 years, I have a problem with that because year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the man could be like, hey, you know what? I'm not happy with this marriage, divorce. And now she has to try and get that money from him. And he can very well, default on it and not pay it because they had a nasty divorce or whatever it was. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I don't
and
see
you're right,
it.
Elham, you're right. Most men end up, not fulfilling these promises. And this is why God is saying you have to pay them the dowry before you consummate this marriage. That's an important key to marriage.
So
We
that
must not take
Rashad's
it for
video,
granted. Yeah. Go ahead, brother. Sorry.
so the Rashad video is talking about, you think that's just limited to property or
Which
the
video?
difference
The divorce one?
about the dowry?
Yeah, he talked about it briefly there, right? Like you said, like unless you're getting divorced, he didn't really expand on it too much, so I don't want to look into it. Like I don't want to extrapolate either. But I just want to put that in with like everything else. I'm trying to make sense of it as a whole, and only way is like, yeah, you can agree to give it a time of divorce, but I think it has to be something that's there. Like I can't be like, hey, I promise to pay you 40,000 the time of the divorce, and then guess what? We divorce. It's a nasty divorce, and I go, you know what? I don't want to give you nothing. Like how? Like she's victimized. Like from so somehow it has to be in her possession. Like you know what I mean? Whether it's
Yeah,
they
it's,
set it aside, where you know what I mean? Like there has
yeah,
to
yeah.
be something that she has access to it, and he can't just claw it back.
So
makes
I mean,
sense. Makes sense.
in general, like yeah, like I agree with like a lot of the premise of what you're saying, like, but these are implementation details that I think that God leaves up to the righteous person to figure out, right? Like versus requirements.
Mm.
I agree that like yeah, you need to have something up front, like you need to have something paid, like as a matter of course. But I think where the wisdom is going to apply is that that's going to be very different for everybody's situation. Like the number is going to be different, the conditions are going to be different, the what's even agreed on as a condition of marriage is going to be very different from person to person to person. And I think one of the reasons why God leaves it open ended is to, basically not pigeonhole into like a binary where this scenario is righteous and the other scenario is righteous. But I do agree that, like, yeah, like, if the purpose of the dowry is for security, she does need to have something up front, and that something up front should be significant. And I mean, I would agree in general, with the idea of like loan, like for example, like when you say the loan, the idea of like you could take an annuity on yourself and guarantee a substantial sum that way. You could do all kinds of things with that, put the burden of it on you, and that don't put her at risk. And there's just so many ways in which you can go about that, especially now. That yeah, like there needs to be a portion, but it's like if we talk about, like I might. So for example, depending on someone's situation, or their past experiences. Let's say I'm marrying someone who, like, their past husband took their house away from them or something like this, and that's a major, like, that's just a special thing. And at her heart, to put at ease, I could say, as part of the dowry or whatever, or part of the marriage agreement, maybe that's a different contract. I could say, like, in legal, like, notarized binding writing that, regardless of divorce or anything, like she has the right to the house and things of this nature or whatever, primary residence or whatever, like that is something I could put in the dowry as a condition of that specific marriage, as a supplementary piece to like whatever upfront thing is. And in that context, well, I wouldn't be paying the whole dowry up front. I would just be giving her a guarantee of like if something happens, this is the scenario where, as a prenuptial agreement, she has this guarantee that holds up in court, that holds up in a legally binding way, that holds up in all kinds of means. And so, like, you take an example like that, and you go, well, you're not paying the whole dowry up front there, but then like you're providing all the security, you're providing the needs specific to that situation, specific to that relationship. And I just think this is why God gives it open-endedness to do the most righteous thing you possibly can um, in the scenario. And the unfortunate consequence of that is, yeah, there's going to be all kinds of people who abuse it all the time. I mean, like we've had so many examples here of people just trying to abuse the letter of the law to justify transgression. So.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for the answers, guys. Sorry for the sidetrack.
Wait, Salami, you were still here?
Bro, asked one question in 45 minutes. But praise God. I got some answers. May God guide us to the right understanding of Quran.
Inshallah. Are we in open session now?
I
I
believe
guess
so.
so.
I have one question.
Yeah, for us, Rodney.
Listen, now this China, for countries like China, US, they have a lot of weapons. You know, China boasting that they have hydrogen bomb, nuclear bomb, Russia, US. And you know, there is 250 years or something until the end of the world. But these scientifically, when you look at these weapons, it's so powerful that literally can wipe out nations. What do you think? Is going to be like kind of connected to
We
the
know
government? Yeah.
we know there's gonna be more war coming. Like that's just the fact, right? Like the fact that Gog and Magog are going to, like in the last 10 years, come back and like wage war and this and that and stuff. More may happen between then. I don't know. Like war may happen. You know what I mean? And hey, maybe that's why you have a population boost where maybe there is going to be a lot of death. I don't know. God knows. And the population is going to drop down, so everyone's going to just start having children like crazy, right? And that's just what it is. Like, God, I don't know how it's going to play out. You know what I mean? But it's a possibility. It may happen. You know.
Mm. Another question I had, that we know that the real money is gold and silver. Okay, God's money. I should say God's money, but and really the value, right? Even the dollar before, it was backed up by gold, and then eventually removed, and now they're being printing billions. So, but I'm
I think the
realistically
real.
thinking,
I
yeah.
think the real currency is brass and gunpowder. But okay.
But realistically, the population is growing, and we are approaching. We are expecting like 70 billion. I don't know how much people more, and there is limited production in gold and silver. So, what do you think? How's that gonna work out? I don't think this paper money going to end or anything.
Yeah, well, look at it this way. Let's say there's 15 million people. After about 80 years, 15 billion has died. You get what I'm saying? Like, yeah. How many billions have like gone and come since the time of like Rashad? If you were to calculate it all, right? How many new people have been born and this and that? I think we're imagining like 75 billion people on Earth all at once. But I think he said like from now until the end of the world, 75 billion people will come.
Yeah.
Right? So even if you like, I think from Rashad's time, it was like there was like 300 years left, something like that. Yeah, it was about 300 years left for Rashad. So if you take 75 billion divided by 3, then that's maybe how much you'll have at a time. Because again, every 100 years, you have a complete turnover, right? So if there's 20 billion people in 100 years, that 20 billion will die, and then you'll have another 20 billion that'll take its place, right?
Oh, okay. Now I know what you mean.
Yeah. So that's just kind of what it is. I mean, it may be more than that and maybe less than that. I'm just using like You know, like
Yeah,
20
it's
billion
just
are born at age 0 all at once, and then boom, you know, after 100 years, well, you know,
yeah,
and who knows? What's interesting is during times of war, right? People have a lot more children also, because it's like, you know, like in Palestine, they're having tons of kids. Well, because they kind of have to. It's like, all right, well, you know, how many of my lineage is gonna live and how many is gonna die? So it's possible. Like honestly, God knows. Honestly, only God knows.
yeah, God
I
knows
do
the
know
best.
that, like, this is just my 2 cents, right? Is that there's like very clear, severe corruption in the world, right? And there are certain groups and certain powers that are very corrupted, and they engage in usury, right? Like global usury, like lending nations large amounts of monies at interest rates that they can never repay. And God says, like, expect a war from God and stuff like this. So I don't know. I think for those guys to kind of stop,
Yeah,
it requires something more than just, you know, normal. That's just me though. I don't know. God knows best. I think maybe that I think the population. What's going to happen with the population is that they're going to become more and more disillusioned by like what's going on, and they're going to maybe come to submission, and that's what I personally think. And then I think
yeah,
as the population becomes more of a submitter, right, then they're going to demand this from their leaders. And then if the population's a submitter, I mean, we know what happens when people try to transgress against those who want to worship God alone, right, and advocate righteousness. God defeats those who oppose it. So I think that's what it'll take personally. I think that you know, I think the population has to come to submission, and then the governments are going to want to oppress us, and then that's what's up.
good
Like
points, Marcelo.
already in America, they have a problem with the corruption of APAC and taking money from Israel and foreign affairs and foreign influence. Americans are already upset about that, and rightfully so, right? You can't be a sovereign nation and then be influenced by a foreign entity. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
a lot of people are waking up to that, and it's causing a lot of turmoil and problems. Be right back, Owen.
good points, Marshall. One more question. In the world of forex trading, okay, you know, a big amount of people are losing money. I would say 80% above. So as submitters in that business, so you have the knowledge that, you know, if you're in that business, you're taking monies, people trading, taking some portion of it, whatever. You have this awareness that the majority of people are losing money. Should you continue in that?